Hello and welcome to yet another one of my Christmas streams as part of Purple's Marathon. Looks like we've already got a good crowd here, so I'm going to see how this goes. I hope you've brought your science questions because that's what we're going to do. I'll obviously take preference for Christmas-themed ones, but as I always say, I will answer any question that you have as long as it's scientific. You just can't promise you're going to like my answer all the time. It might be I don't know, or even worse, we'll see. But we're going to find out what's going to happen. So, by the way, if anyone is part of the usual marathon, I have put the link in for the StreamYards in there. I'm happy to have guests on. However, I'm happy to get started. So, welcome all of those in the chat. You got Maya, Vandalia, Jason, Gestra, Delicious Danish, Brainless, the Brainless Steel, Ember, hello again. Oh, what the beck? A lot of people I'm seeing from other channels too, so it looks like you got a good crowd. Who else have I missed? Savage Minnow. Oh, there's about like 30 people here. Got a few people viewing, so yeah. Oh well. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I hope you've brought your science questions. So if you want to ask science questions, the rule is you just ask. Just make sure you at the channel in the chat, the YouTube chat, so I can see it. It'll highlight it for you, or highlight it for me, and I can put them up. All right. Now, while I am waiting for questions, I will give a tiny bit of context why my channel has been so quiet, just in case there is anyone who's curious. Well, as the name suggests, down on this corner, I am almost a doctor. I'm hoping that title will be incorrect this time next year. However, yeah, we'll see. It's just really busy with PhD at the moment. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But I will come back to making regular videos, not just live streams, but actually doing like scripted and edited videos as well. But it may have to wait until we get back to, well, until I get back to real life, regular life, having a life, something like that after finishing PhD. All right. Okay. So a couple of questions, and I can see when they also, if I miss your question, just keep spamming it in the chat until I see it. Okay. So I think the first one that I spotted, unless there was one earlier, was where was it? I think it's how does Santa's sled fly? And okay, yep. All right. Let me actually do this the professional way, so I can actually this up. There we go. See, I'm a professional YouTuber. I can actually bring comments up. So, Ember, how does Santa's sled fly? Well, actually, that's a difficult one because we haven't actually got video footage of it flying in a wind tunnel. So smokes, we have to actually see. It's going to be very fast. I actually did a stream on this with, I believe it was Jen, who's one of my more regular co-hosts, or at least we came up with quite a few theories, but almost would need a warp drive for the speeds that we're talking about. So my guess is that it's bending space-time to get around, at which point flying is, I don't know if flying's the correct term, but it's definitely a term. Although I think to answer one of your, answer a question slightly better than that one. Where does Saturn get so many moons? Well, both Saturn and Jupiter are the two largest planets in our solar system, who I think Jupiter alone is about nearly half the mass of the solar system if you ignore the sun. So, or at least of the planets, that is. So between the two of them, their gravitational field's just so much bigger than everything else that they trap a lot of moons. In fact, there's if you're talking about Jupiter and Saturn, particularly Jupiter, because Jupiter has even more moons and actually has more comets, it protects Earth because it basically acts as a giant gravitational shield. There's what's known as Lagrange points when you're talking about an orbit. So, familiar with an orbit, you've got center of mass, and you have two bodies orbiting each other. In this case, because the sun is so much more massive than any of the planets, the center of gravity is pretty much, well, you can assume it's pretty much where the sun actually is. It'll be slightly off center, but when you do the maths, it's so slight that it doesn't make a huge difference. There are certain points where you can actually fit objects in that orbit and they'll just stay there because they'll be held by the gravitational effects of both the sun and either Jupiter or Saturn moving around. And two of them actually occur in the same. So if you draw the ring out for Jupiter, you'll actually have two of them occurring a bit further out, but evenly from Jupiter. So partly around the orbit. And so you have all these asteroids that just sort of follow and lead Jupiter around. It's a little hard without a diagram, but you end up trapping not just a lot of moons, but you trap a lot of comets too. I would have to check this number, but I believe the orbit of Jupiter has more comets than the asteroid belt. Well, sorry, more asteroids than the asteroid belt. So, yeah, we're going to see. All right, I'm going to try and get through. If I miss questions, that might be because there's a lot of them going around. So, as I said, just with other ones. Okay. Here's actually a relevant one that I can. Also, welcome back. I've haven't seen you for a while. What are you almost a doctor in? Well, I'm hoping physics, so I'll be obviously more specific than that. My PhD is in adaptive optics, and it's specifically integrated optics for gas detection. What that basically means is I play with lasers to, well, make methane sing. In other words, I'm building gas detectors for environmental monitoring. I'm trying to develop new ways of doing it so we can make small, compact detectors that, although we're miniaturizing everything, we don't lose the sensitivity or trying not to lose as much sensitivity as you would have with a really, really big machine. So basically making mini gas detectors. And I do that one with lasers at making methane sing, which I promise I'll put a proper video out when I finish, but I'm waiting till I finish the thesis. So that way, when I actually say I've done X, it's the complete story of doing X. The next bit after that, as I've done, well, actually it happened a bit before, but the thesis will be the next bit, is also to do with fiber optics, but particular devices, but essentially still doing gas detection. All right. And all right. I guess the simple one for this one, Azho, is because he's curious. I like questions. I have a lot of questions. It's just I'm not here to answer my own questions. That would be Ember. Another question from Ember. Let's see. No, not at this stage. But scientists are not always the most creative at naming things. Yeah, my favorite one is the barefaced go away bird, but there's plenty of other names. There's some of them are creative, some of them not so much. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they did, just because of the relevance. Like often they do cultural relevant naming of things. We'll see. Not that I'm aware of. This is a question. Okay, so I'm just going to go through most of the questions that we do. So this question here is a good one, and I will answer that once I finish the PhD. But I promise there is a good answer for that one. Yeah, also on that point, that's also because I need people to tag me, and my channel's small enough that it doesn't. It's not a huge one. All right, let's have a slightly different. I have no idea. That's probably a question for Brainbug's channel, for Bree's channel. Uh, y- I don't think that one's a. Nope, not a question. All right, trying to keep going down. Ah, what is your favorite Lagrange point and why is it L3? I'm not sure if L3 is mine. So this is going back to the early question with Saturn. Those are the parts of the orbit that are stable. You can put other objects in them. Is it L2 that has the James Webb Space Telescope? Because that is probably my current favorite one, just because it has a giant IR telescope, and my PhD is essentially infrared spectroscopy. So I feel like I actually have some idea how that thing works. I've done a couple of streams on it too. I've looked up into, I have looked into the development of it. It's quite cool. The engineering is amazing because the thing is so cold. But again, that's probably for another one. So it's currently my Lagrange point is my favorite one is where the space telescope is. Though I guess some of the others are pretty cool because you can keep asteroids in them and from Jupiter and Saturn, and they don't smack into Earth or not as likely to smack into Earth. So it kind of protects us. Actually, here we go. Another one. Everyone likes space. I am going to shift my camera because if not, I'm going to have my head cut off by all of the larger questions. All right. If we're able to set up colonies on the moons of Jupiter, would they be able to have regular trade with other moons, moons of other planets like Saturn, or even Earth? What would be shipping type? This is actually a really good one. Because we always think of space travel, like how do we get to X planet? And people might talk about trying to go to other solar systems, but even with our own one, current technology, you can only launch rockets to let's say between Earth and Mars, because that'll give a rough idea about what it'd be like to go from, say, Earth's moon to, well, Mars, I guess, or a similar distance. It takes about a year and a half to actually make that journey, and you can only launch rockets roughly once every 1.5 years as well. So we're talking huge time periods, because it's not just covering the distance, but also having all of the planets, well, at least the ones you're interested in, the planets' orbits line up. So if you're dealing with moons, say, of Saturn or Jupiter, it's going to get insanely more complicated because, well, there's a lot more of them. Again, going between moons within like just one planet, so keeping with, say, Saturn or Jupiter, again, because they have a lot of moons, it's probably not as hard because moons have less of a gravitational pull. So your rocket wouldn't, or your, I guess, form of space travel, I'm assuming it's a rocket of some kind, though we'll see. Good solar sails, I think, at that scale would probably actually be quite effective because you could set up giant laser stations to push things around. Again, that's a question for another time. Then it wouldn't be as hard as, say, launching a rocket between Earth and Mars or Earth and Jupiter or something. So getting there, the difficulty, I think, will be initial setup, in that you have to set up these systems so you can move it around, and just the sheer distances involved within planets, not as bad, but going between the moons of different planets, you're potentially talking years with our current technology. So we would need to increase that a lot. Yes, though solar sails is an interesting one because it actually is a relative, in terms of at least how space travel is, a short range thing, unless you use an insane amount of power, because lasers will diverge, so the beam will get wider and wider. So over time, the amount of actual laser pressure pushing on your sail gets less and less because you get further away from it. So we'll see. Shipping time, it will depend on which planets or which moons of which planets you're talking about. But as I said, between Earth and Mars, about a year and a half. Though I, like with most technology, probably going to get faster. And all right, I am going to try and get through the chat pretty quickly. You'll have to apologize because I've actually got a good crowd here. So he's like Dr. T. Don't think so. I'll be a physics doctor. I think, unless I'm not sure exactly who you're talking about. Oh, another question from Ember. This question I definitely know I answered in a previous stream with Jen. Jen from Polymathic, sorry. Hope Jen can, if Jen's around, if she can show up. I hope she's doing all right. Santa used time dilation. Almost certainly, yes. It's probably one of the few ways that he can actually meet all the requirements that commonly go with our traditional understanding of Santa. I think that would be the best way for him to get around without actually have the time to go to every house. If there's only one and you make assumptions about how many houses he's got to visit. But we definitely did some basic calculations on that one. All right. Here's one. Horse Doctor has any yekkers that attempt to attack what you do, like they do with other scientists? Not really. I think that's just because my channel is still relatively small, and they tend to go after the bigger fish because it gets them more attention. One of my favorite descriptions for some of them, and again, this is only an attack on certain people, and I'm not going to get into specifics here, is that they're essentially like internet trolls who put in way too much effort, in that they'll go after the channels with more attention. So not yet. I have had a flat earther ask me to go on, was it Nathan Oakley's chat? One of the flat earth Nathans that's not the most friendly, so I kindly said no, but that guy was very nice. He went around commenting nice things on my videos. I've had, although I have had a Tangelo show up once or twice, but I don't tend to talk too much on this topic. My main thing here is I don't actually really talk about beliefs. I don't really mind because most of the people I do science with are from beliefs all over the place. Like we've got such a wide variety of different. Just not just religions, but just different worldviews, and yet the only thing that really matters is whether you do good science or not. And so on this channel, I try and keep it to that. So a lot of the time, the young Earth creationists and other pseudoscientists are welcome to show up. But if they start going off track of science, I'm just going to say that's for another channel, another time. Not my area of expertise, so I can lean it. How is machine learning being used in physics? How many days have you got? So, okay, I'm going to keep this narrow because we've been talking about astronomy. Also, I just heard what I think is some thunder, so I apologize if that comes through the mic, but hopefully we can keep this minimized a little bit. The machine learning is actually very, very useful. And when we're talking something like astronomy, there is a hell of a lot of data that's coming in from a lot of telescopes. So if you look at how much a radio telescope array can take in, it's data that we're not like on levels that you wouldn't be used to unless you're someone who works in a similar field. It is still one of the fastest ways to get some of the data around between the telescopes. Is actually to put it on a hard drive and fly it, because we're talking that many terabytes that sending it over even the fastest of internet connections still won't get the data across by the time someone with a giant briefcase of modern hard drives can move it over. So sifting through that data is very, very important. And that actually is probably a whole stream on its own about what people can do with it. Because a lot of the people I'm experimentalist, but an experimentalist, but the majority of the people in my office and those nearby who are also doing physics PhDs are all computational physics in astro. And a bunch of them do use machine learning. Not all of them, but some of them do. And it's, yeah. Data. Oh, okay. Sorry, I saw a later comment. I will get to. Sorry, I saw a later. So there is a update on this one. Come on, let me find it. Sorry, I'm a little behind in the chat. So yes, I am aware that because machine learning is a specific way to adapt to it. The reason why is it's a little outside of my field. All I'm saying is that there are a lot of different uses for different parts of computational analysis in physics. So it's probably a better question for someone else. I don't tend to use it myself, but when you have this much data, I do know some of the other PhDs who work alongside me will use machine learning algorithms to basically do their data assessments. It's, as I said, it's in areas that have a lot of data. So it's pushing what I tend to do a bit more. As I said, I tend to play with lasers in uh, play with lasers to get my achievements. If you can call them achievements. But I've built some detectors so far, and yes, I do promise that when I get to the end of my PhD, I will do a video that outlines what I actually did. But I do apologize for most people. You're going to just have to wait a little bit longer for that. Also, I do apologize if I'm skipping a couple of questions. This is a few more questions than I was expecting, so you're doing well. Everyone's actually met my request, so I'm not complaining. Why would I say this guy's name? You have to say it 3 times. So as long as I don't say it 3 times, it should be fine. And as I said, I don't actually have a problem with them showing up if they want to ask genuine science questions. My approach, I only have a problem if someone's pseudoscientific. If someone leans too much into philosophy or theology for this channel, which is not something I tend to discuss just because that's not my area of expertise, then I'll say as much. And if they cause a bit of an issue, well, I can just mute. But I tend to be a bit hesitant on that. Not a science question, hereticals. Although, hi Chris, been a while. I'm around. I'll definitely be around. I'm not leaving the city until I finish the PhD. So people have got about half a year or so. I'm hoping mid next year I'll submit. So if anyone's wondering when I'll start making the video on what I've done, about then. It's just when you're working, 40 plus hour weeks on the equivalent of minimum wage, it's a bit hard to keep YouTube channels going as well as that. So apologies, but I will definitely get back to it. Hi Maya. Yes, sorry, I know I haven't been doing too many live streams, as I've been saying. It's very, very busy, but I will be on other people's channels in this community. So if you keep an eye out, I normally make appearances. I think the last one I did was a little while ago now. In YouTube videos. So yeah, that's okay. But it was on Granny's channel talking about. Convenient to one of the questions above, young Earth creationism, but it was actually assessing a science paper that they wrote. So I was able to get into the physics. As I said, I'll happily go on other people's channels to talk about sort of stuff, but I tend to limit it on this one. Okay. Also, looks like we have I've got a guest now. So, hello, Ember.
Hello. I'm super excited. I'm always happy to meet a new science friend.
Good. Yes. So have you been following all the streams so far? I've been a little slack. I've been trying to lurk in the background here and there, but
Not all of them. I have had to, eat and sleep now and then, things like that. But yeah, I'm trying to hang out. It's a good time. You said this is an AMA. We can ask you anything. For a lot of people,
yes.
this is the first time we're meeting you. So would you mind
Yes.
talking a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I've already sort of given a hint at what I do for my PhD, which is actually where the name of the channel comes from. Sorry, camera's mirrored. Yes, down there. Is that I'm trying to get a PhD in physics. So almost a doctor. I was actually called that by Dr. Carl. Anyone who doesn't know who that is, he's basically Australia's Bill Nye. And He
Hmm.
called me that on the radio. It was national radio. It was only to regional, but it was an amazing opportunity to go on and chat with him. He's an awesome communicator, and I've learned a few things from him. And so I thought, it's a good name, and I decided to keep it for the channel. So I've basically been using this channel to practice my science communication, and also I enjoy doing it. So I like to be able to talk about science, and I've been giving a lot of thought about the exact direction, trying to angle where will my channel fit. I will make the announcement about exactly what will happen to my channel when I finish the PhD, because I still need to actually decide. However, where I'm probably going to go is actually talking more about the science behind certain historical things. I've already made a few videos on those. My last one,
Hmm.
which is in terms of early videos, my most successful one was the Comet, the world's only rocket fighter, and it was the world's only one for a very, very good reason, which, if you look at the title card of the video, probably be alone to tell you why. And I've also done things like, my second video I ever made was Project Excalibur. It's still the most viewed video on my channel. And I keep looking at it, I'm just like cringing, because it's like, that's the second one I made. Of course, it's not going to be as clean as what I can make now. So I'm trying to get
Naturally.
better. But yes, yeah. So I basically have my channel here just as a way to talk science, because I enjoy doing it, and my main concern is with science. I tend not to get into a lot of the young Earth creationism or flat Earth or any of the other common pseudoscience topics here. Even I haven't done anything specific on, say, anti-vax or anything, but that's
Mm.
because it's not what I tend to get into.
Yeah, it's a
But
sticky one.
yeah, but I've been on other streams to talk about sort of stuff, and I have definitely done sort of live streams where we've done debunks. My favorite one was when we went through. I had Mero and Jen on, and we went through and ripped some of the protect yourself from negative radiation, and we just ripped about the bad science. My favorite one was
Mm.
thinking, like, buy this Faraday cage to put your Wi-Fi router in so that it protects you from the radiation. I'm like, if you stop the radiation coming from your Wi-Fi router, you're not going to have Wi-Fi. My favorite comment to one of those was like, it works brilliantly, but my internet now drops out all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shock.
Um,
Oh my goodness. That had to be a troll. It had to be a troll.
I had to be, but I just love when you get those sort of questions, because when you have I love the sort of creativity when you get a troll that's sort of very creative. You got to give a bit of credit. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. For sure.
since since this is the first time on my you've been on my channel, because I said I've been a bit quiet recently, so it's
Hmm.
probably enough about me. Do you want to yourself a bit of an intro, and I'll use that to not only listen but to also try and catch up on the chat too.
Ah,
Um,
yes, the chat's always scooting right along. I know I'm a bad influence there too. I'm just like, I have to go get my coffee and here's 20 questions.
Oh, I'm not complaining. I like lots of questions, because if it keeps going up, then I get to the point where I can be like, you can ask any question, and now I get to pick,
Yeah, it's always a
which
plus.
might have to happen. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, so I'm member. I'm at a bet better than number here on YouTube. I mostly do counter apologetics, increasingly trans stuff, science when I can squeeze it in, because I love science. It's space especially. That's my bailiwick. Um, and debate reviews every so often with a fellow named Mark Reed.
uh, okay, yes,
Yeah,
I've seen. I think I've seen a couple of those. Yeah, no, it's yeah. I don't mind watching debate reviews, but it's gotten to the point where a lot of internet debates, I'm just like, I'll go watch something
yeah. A
else.
lot of them are pretty ishy. I've been dipping into the classics, Hitchens, Dan Baker or Barker. Bleh, I can't English. You know the
No,
older
neither
stuff
can
with
I
the
at this
classy
times,
folks.
but we try.
Yeah, yeah. It's good stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
So, I mean, look, happy to answer science questions, obviously. So I do.
Mhm.
I'm also trying to balance the chat as well. So again, I apologize if I miss um
Oh,
questions.
that reminds me. I know you know Bree because you mentioned
Yes,
Bumblebee
we've been on
earlier.
each other's channels before. I love doing sort of dinosaur. I think we did my favorite one so far, at least that I remember, was we had a look at dinosaur depictions in movies and
Nice.
what people get wrong. Oh, in the
That's
chat.
fantastic. Yeah, Bree's in chat, and Bree is actually starting a new debate channel specifically because of all the dumpster fires elsewhere on the interwebs.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way I've been leaning. I've been the ones that I prefer, the ones that are just a more casual chat. It's not about trying to destroy the opposition in this allotted time. I prefer this one where it's a bit more. Let's just try and figure out what each other believes, see if there's some common ground, see if there really isn't much in the way of common ground, and go from there. But some of the I don't know if you'll agree with me, but a lot of the internet debates have become just about clickbait. Let's how many get views, so they make it a
Mm,
show. It's more about the show than actually getting a point across. That and I just like no, I'll just go watch a video on some history or something like it's just
mhm.
or some science. It's enough. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But on the topic of science, what
hmm.
is it that drove you towards physics and I guess lasers also?
Oh.
While we're on the subject.
So it's a bit of a tricky question to answer, but it's the short answer is it just sort of developed over time. The longer answer is I've always sort of had an interest in both science and history, but my interest in science was always a bit more formalized. I always wanted to study it a bit more. So even throughout high school, I took physics and chem all the way to year 12, so final year here. And then when I went to go to university, I was like, no, I have to do something with science. I didn't see myself becoming a scientist long term, in that I didn't see myself getting as far as doing a PhD. I thought I'd just do the undergrad and leave. So I did a double degree. Yeah, I have a business degree, but we don't talk about that one. Um, it's a very expensive piece of paper. No, it's more
Hmm.
complicated than that. But uh, I don't really cover anything with business here. Don't worry, people. I'm not going to go into in depth about what I remember from econometrics or what I've forgotten about econometrics. Though throughout the whole thing, I liked the science. I just wanted to keep that, so that whatever job I went to, I'd still have some of those skills. I'd still have the background where I've done a science degree, and the skills that you learn in science are very transferable. You often learn maths and analytical skills, as well, problem solving, as well as programming, particularly if you're doing something like physics. And within science, the two sciences that I got drawn to more was chemistry and physics. And so I'd actually describe myself, if I had to pick, as more of a physical chemist. The reason, not the other way around, is that my uni doesn't really have chemical physicists, but we do have physical chemists. I actually teach chemistry. I don't teach physics, although I could. I just that's how I started, and I enjoy doing that. Um, I I just saw one of the later comments. Yes, I'm pretty sure most people here have done more programming than me, but I do know the basics. So just head that off for it's further. And so over time, as I was doing undergrad, I did a lot of volunteer projects. So I'd get to actually some of them were actually part of courses, or I could actually get like little internships. So but a lot of volunteers when I couldn't get one of those. And so I got a bit of a handle of what it was like to be in a research lab. Obviously, doing a research project for 6 weeks doesn't prepare you for a 4 year PhD. um, a bit longer than most in Australia because COVID. That's a long story
Mm.
for another day. And but as I went through, it was like, no, I like the research more and more. I do enjoy the science. And so I decided I'm going to stay around for one more year to do an honors, which for anyone who doesn't know is like a 1 year master's. So it's a honors thesis, like a research master's. And
Mm.
in Australia, you can go straight from that to doing a PhD. Since I had the double degree and then that, it was like, so I went. I had. You do need to get a pretty high mark, though they're reasonably generous, and it's one of those things where most people will get the requirement to be able to go do a PhD. It's just a lot of people are like, I'm done now, which is understandable. It's a huge commitment, and we don't need everyone to do a PhD. I would argue we need more people to appreciate science, but not necessarily understand or do science. I think that it's a balancing act, and again, for another time. But through that, I also got into teaching as well. So, and I've enjoyed that, and that's where I started to learn the science communication. We were doing teaching classes, doing shows as well, and so slowly developed into where I am now. And then when it came to choosing the PhD, it was actually looking at what are the people who have I done projects with, what have I enjoyed, and it just so happened that by then spectroscopy and optics, including lasers, had just been what I enjoyed doing, and well, here I am. So yes, as I said, it's a bit of a long story, but you get there in the end.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. Titan says I have to play his theme music. Do you mind?
I'll go for it.
Titan Uranus! Titan Uranus!
Yes. Yeah. I think we all know what's happening with that one, and anyone who's actually, even people who've been watching my channel for a while, veterans of the live streams, will definitely know that one. Also, we actually have today's organizer. Hey, Purple.
Purple! Greetings, sentient beings.
Greeting. Some days I'm not sure if I'm more or less sentient than others, but
actually, that's self-testing. If you're self-aware enough to argue with me, you qualify.
Okay, I'll
well, that's a lot easier than the Turing test.
Yes. How are you going?
Okay. You know, I know people who know me worry about me, you know, doing these things they consider routine, like sleeping and eating. So I slept for about 3-4 hours, and now I have food. So I'm doing both in the same day.
Okay. Well, that's good. And thanks for organizing this. So I think this is my third year in a row doing it, isn't it?
I think so.
I think so. But yeah, this is actually a very large number for my channel of like live viewers. So I'm not.
Everyone has been saying that, but you know, even in the wee hours of the morning, we had much higher viewers than we expected.
People want to party.
I am not complaining with that.
And just to let the audience know, Sloth Girl's daughter just brought her home, so she's back up in her own space and just kind of wiped out from dealing with the grandkids. So she just wanted to be somewhere quiet.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Cool,
All right.
Cool.
Okay. Sorry, I am now sifting through the chat as well to see. Everyone's saying hi. Questions. By the way, if you do have questions, feel free to go for it, because I think they've calmed down a little bit, which is actually good. It means I can start catching up on the chat. But this is one advantage of now having other people on, is that I can ask people questions and then sort of just be like,
I did have a science question, although I know it's out of your usual area.
I might be able to help.
Well, do you know anything about the Mount St. Helens eruption?
I know a little bit. It is outside my area.
Okay. I was just wondering about the flow that was left over and the state of it today, that theoretically, if you discovered something was buried under the flow it left, how much work would it be to dig it out?
That's actually a really good question.
I don't know what the materials left there are, or how hard they are.
From my understanding,
where?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand it wasn't really a normal lava flow; that it was more ash than lava.
Yes, and that's actually what I was going to go to. So there's two. I mean, there's probably more than this when you can dig down to it, but there's two major types of volcanoes. You get the large shield volcanoes, things like Hawaii, which, if you think of those sorts of ones, they tend to exist further away from fault lines. It tends to be like bubbles of magma coming up, and they tend to be less explosive, much larger. They're more like a shield because they're actually relatively flat when you take the scale of them into account, but much, much bigger, which is why you can get, the Hawaiian Islands. It's actually curious because if you look at Hawaii, you can look at the islands. There's actually like a dot of them going, because you can see as the oceanic plate's been shifting, but the bubble of magma has been coming up in the same spot. So even after the islands, there are underwater mountains. I find that cool. those ones will
Mhm.
tend to give you that very stereotypical lava flow that you see in
Mhm.
movies, and actually if you watch news about when Hawaii has eruptions. But it's also why they tend to not be as, oh no, the thing's erupting, as more of, oh look, it's erupting again. And the flows tend to be slower. You can generally move people out of the way. Yes,
Yeah, you
it's
have
not.
time to evacuate.
Yes, and it's a slower, and those you get those really solid flows. But however, a lot of the volcanoes that we think of, particularly if you think of, say, the ones around the fault lines, and ones like Mount St. Helens, they tend to be much narrower volcanoes. I think the cone one, I actually mental blank for the name, but they tend to they tend to be on fault lines, and as a result, tend to have a hell of a lot more pressure pushing the stuff up. So you're not likely to get those as much in the way of traditional lava flows, not to say there isn't any. They tend to be more explosive, and you'll get a lot more ash. And I know that Mount St. Helens, well, it was definitely just a tiny, tiny bit explosive when it went
Yeah.
off. And I'm not talking traditional chemical explosives, but more just the pressure releasing. And those ones you tend to get a lot more ash. So my guess here, and again, this would probably be a nice question for a geologist, but my guess is that it would actually be easier to dig these things up.
Mhm.
Again, depending exactly where and under what conditions, over time that might get compressed. I believe,
Yeah,
because
that's one of the
again,
things I was thinking of because, it's been 30 years now.
yeah, you would be able to. I think one of the issues, think going back to history for a minute, I think was, if you think of Pompeii, I believe one of the issues that the Romans had when they tried to go in and see if they could rescue people is it was so soft that they couldn't actually get anywhere. They just sank straight into the ash. So sometimes it's actually too soft to do much, although I imagine after 30 years it would have been compressed a bit just by natural forces. And again, it'll probably get funneled down into valleys or in certain directions. So we will. So yeah, question for that. A good question for geologists, but my guess is fairly easy. All right. Sorry.
The tricky bit is Spirit Lake, because when the ash mixes with water, it compresses faster, and
Yeah,
you end
good
up with
point.
something kind of cementish going on.
Yes, and actually, I think that's what the Romans used to make their concrete a
Yeah.
lot better than our
They've
modern ones.
determined the secret of the Roman concrete was that they used volcanic ash and seawater.
Yes. When the
and
cinder
that made it
cone
a
stuff,
higher density when it settled down.
Yeah, and
when it dries
there
up
is,
above, it's just tough. But when it gets wet, then it forms shale.
yes, and that's the other thing. As I said, after 30 years, you'd have to consider where, because water flow and natural ones.
Yeah.
However, whether it's compressed, again, because we are talking geology, we're talking relative to solid igneous rock. Whether it's compressed that far, I don't think so. But again, question for a geologist. I might
Yep.
have to find someone.
Yeah, like I said, I knew it was a bit outside your area, but
It's still interesting, and hopefully, I've still parted some information about volcanoes. But what's also interesting is sort of I know
Andre's
the
right.
West Coast
I was off
historically
by a decade. It's actually been 40 years, and I knew it was in the 80s, so I just
20 years ago.
Yeah, I've only had 3 or 4 hours sleep, so my brain's only half functioning.
Yeah, my brain
now.
still hasn't quite registered that the 90s is 30 years ago. So
Yeah, I'm having trouble with that too, because then I have to acknowledge how old my daughter is.
Is there a reason that you ask Purple? Like, did you leave something near the mountain that might be buried?
Yes. Well, I didn't actually leave it there. It just accidentally got trapped there, and we just figured out where it is now.
Oh, okay. This is I feel like
mysterious.
this needs more investigation.
It's just an element from my novel.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
All right. All right. Sorry, if I have missed questions, please feel free to just at me again, repeat them. I am.
We're distracting the poor.
And
Oh
Robin
no!
was also
As I
saying
said,
poor
it's
that
almost
good
doctor.
because I can
again.
track. It's just trying to track.
Yep.
Yes. Sorry. anyone thinks I'm being a bit slow, yes, my brain is just fried from doing a year of PhD. I basically describe my PhD as a giant rock that I live under at the moment.
fair.
But that's because I'm towards the end of it. They're always a bit more crazy when they get the pointy end of it.
It's not very reassuring to think that by the time anyone becomes a doctor, the brain's fried out.
I am hoping to have a bit of a break when I finish to refresh my brain, but
I gotta reboot
within I guess the academic community, or at least the younger ones anyway. There's sort of this meme or memes that go around about the fourth and fifth year PhDs. Fifth year is more of a relevant thing for, say, America and Canada, where the PhDs has the embedded masters and takes 5 years, whereas here it's between about 3 and 4 years. I'm looking closer to 4 because I started 2 weeks before a global pandemic with an experimental PhD. Would not recommend. Please try to avoid global pandemics before starting PhDs. Experimental ones anyway. Anyway.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yes.
Titan Uranus is trying to call in another physicist so they can have a duel.
Yeah, that was the fellow that was being mentioned earlier. Dr. Tapioca Weasel's his channel name. He's Mike Van de Graaff. He's also a laser physicist, coincidentally. He works. He's what are they building? It's a version of Lego, but it's bigger. He uses lasers to.
That would be Duplo.
Well,
oh my goodness! But yeah, he plays with lasers and atoms, eventually to measure gravity waves. Very freaking cool stuff. And he's usually hanging around near where Maya is, but no one's seen him in days. So we're starting to. Wait.
Native Atheist said something about let's talk about the elephant foot of Chernobyl.
Oh, that's actually something I probably can talk a little bit about because I've done some work on. I'd made a video on Chernobyl, so I was looking it up. So the elephant's foot was, yes, the elephant in the room or in the reactor. Actually, no. For this one, I have to make a slight adjustment if everybody will bear with me, because if we're talking about Chernobyl, then I think I need to change the.
Very appropriate.
Though, as you'll see, the writing up on this side here says reactor in English, so I know that this is most likely not Chernobyl, because that would definitely not be in English. I know it's not. Yes, old Soviet Union and Ukraine. Let's try and remind the modern Russian army not to fly missiles into Chernobyl for a very damn good reason.
Yeah.
But that's... yes, I'll try not to get too political, but I don't think anyone here will be arguing with me on that point. Yes, so did you have a specific question with the elephant's foot, or you just wanted to inquire what it was, how they did it?
It was a chat question that Purple was referencing.
Sorry, I'm just trying to...
yeah, it was native
scrolling back
in chat, but
yes,
that was all he said about it. There wasn't like a follow-up to that.
Okay. If someone does have the question, just feel free to repeat. And again, just at me in the chat and I'll add it in. But I can happy to mention a couple of things on it. So Chernobyl is it's actually a very interesting case when it comes to nuclear technology. And probably a better commentary on safety procedure. So I just want to remind everyone here that far more people have died from coal power plants than anyone's ever died from nuclear. It is one of the safest forms of energy generation if you look at deaths per capita. Because, there's actually been very few... I'm going to say directly related deaths because it's actually hard to tell how many people Chernobyl and Fukushima will have affected. However, you can still look at death rates in those areas and see what happens over time, see if there's an increase. Though again, how much I trust all the numbers coming out of, say, Chernobyl?
Yeah.
It's a very, very confusing case because it's a time when the Soviet Union was trying to increase freedom of the press. But at the same time, the fact that they tried to cover Chernobyl up was actually really shot the Soviet Union in the foot. And of course, it could also just be that it wasn't deliberate. It was just that time of the Soviet Union was not the most organized. So records were not kept well enough. Though we have reasonable records, but as I said, we'll see. However, what we can directly relate to deaths from nuclear power is very, very small. Coal power plants, particularly from air pollution, that's the main one, kills far, far more people. So I mention that because I know that a lot of people, there's a lot, probably not here, but out there, generally, there's a lot of pseudoscience that goes around, a lot of fear mongering against it. Which, that's a separate thing. But
I used to oppose nuclear power, but the more I've learned about it, I realize that the dangers have been really overrated.
Yes.
So I do feel it is our best option for the immediate future to transition to safer energy.
Yes, I don't see nuclear as a long-term solution, like a long-term option for the Earth. In certain cases, I think it will be remote areas, space travel, etc. Some form of nuclear power. I can see having a use basically the foreseeable future and almost beyond, depending on what we do. Obviously, you can't predict too far. However, in terms of being able to switch over from fossil fuels to green energy, I see nuclear as a good option. But again, I'm not saying that this is the only thing we do. Obviously, everything's a balancing act. You have to look at other things and eventually transition through. However, Chernobyl was an RBMK reactor. There's 4 cores, which means there's actually 4 basically nuclear reactors that ran in the Chernobyl plant. And it was only one of them that actually went. The last one of them was not shut down until, I believe, 2001. So that 20, or nearly, is it nearly 20 years? No, I can't count. But it was like, we're talking like decades. There are actually some of the Chernobyl type reactors still running today, all for the former Soviet Union countries, and none built after Chernobyl, though. They were, however, Chernobyl, so RBMK reactor, Bolshoi Mashinovsky Kanalny, if I remember, and so apologies for butchering the Russian, or high power channel reactor, is basically the Russians trying to save money on heavy water. So when you have regular water, it's made up of H2O, so it's 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen. Heavy hydrogen or deuterium is basically where you add a neutron to the nucleus. So you basically make the nuclei, the center of the atom, heavier. It doesn't actually change the chemistry, but it does change the nuclear physics. Yes, it's slightly more dense. However, regular water is actually pretty good at absorbing neutrons. Neutrons don't get absorbed by much. The name, they're fairly neutral. They don't do anything, or they don't do much. But they can be absorbed. And when you're running a fission type reactor like this, it's a balancing act. You have 1 neutron will go on to, basically, if you start with a neutron and it's traveling, it'll whack into another atom. You'll get that atom break apart and into smaller daughter products. And you'll either get, depending on which nuclear reaction, either 2 or 3 neutrons. So you can imagine that if you had 1 going to 2 or 3, or let's just say 2, then those 2 go on and you have 4, and then so on. It builds up exponentially. So in a nuclear reactor, you don't want that. For a nuclear bomb, you do. That's how they work. But for a reactor, you actually want to capture some of those neutrons. You literally just want to absorb them by stuff that isn't going to decay, so that instead of having 1 go to 2 all the time, it's on average 1 to 1, or you can slightly speed up and slow down the reactor as you need. One of the things that they do to boost how many neutrons actually cause a reaction is they use heavy water, because deuterium is not very good at absorbing neutrons, but it slows them down, which is actually important. If they go too fast, they'll just basically pass through everything and leave the chamber. So you want them running at the right speed. Heavy water does that. The advantage here is that if your reactor starts to get out of control and gets really, really hot, that water is going to start to boil or cause voiding if you have a huge amount of energy and it's also compressed. And so you'll have less of this moderator. The moderator speeds the reaction up. So if you have less of it, the reaction will actually slow down, and it actually acts as just another like built-in control mechanism that helps stop the reaction from getting out of control. Chernobyl, on the other hand, heavy water is expensive. So the Soviet Union was like, no, screw that. We'll use graphite as the moderator. Now, graphite works as a pretty good moderator. However, you still need a coolant pumping through your reactor. So they used regular water. But as I said, regular water is good at absorbing neutrons. It slows the reaction down. So if you heat the water up, you actually end up speeding the reaction up. So if the reactor starts going out of control and getting hotter and hotter, it's just going to be a positive feedback loop, or negative if you look at the results, but positive feedback from a loop that will build this reaction up until it gets out of control, or some other factor takes over and slows the reaction down. And for Chernobyl, it's not like the scientists weren't aware of this. However, the pumps at Chernobyl that kept the coolant running were powered by the reactor itself.
Ooh.
Now, they had safety mechanisms in part, and they had emergency backup generators because they were well aware that if something went wrong and the pumps went, you were going to have a pretty nasty meltdown. So, but what they wanted to do is they wanted to run a test to see, is there enough just angular momentum in the generators, so enough energy in the spinning turbines to keep the reactor powered until they could either shut the reactor down or bring in extra backups. So their plan was to basically bypass a lot of the safety valves and safety features and bring the reactor down to almost shutdown conditions. You'd still have a nuclear reaction going on, but it'd be at such a low space that wasn't actually generating any energy. And again, they're only doing this in one of the 4 cores. And then they just wanted to see how long does it take for this turbine to spin down, and can it actually keep just enough power generation that they can run the pumps until the reactor goes. I think it was just enough until they could bring in other backups, but they obviously, as I said, shut down the emergency things. However, the test got delayed because there was a massive power demand during the day. So the reactor they had to keep all cores at full capacity. It also caused another issue in that there was a huge buildup of xenon, which is also really, really good at absorbing neutrons. So it slows the reaction down. So the team at midnight switches over, and the new team didn't know about the fact that the reactors were running at full capacity all day. So they didn't know there was all this gas that's slowing the reaction down, just sitting in the reactor. So by the way, they didn't tell the safety officer they were running this test. They just did it. Oh,
good.
Because that's always the best thing to do.
So it was just the fact that they didn't do shift turnover to tell the next shift what was going on.
Yes. But they hadn't told them that it had been a high demand. I mean, it's a number of things too. And there was one more thing because, anyway, it's quite a number of factors. None of them are based on nuclear power being inherently bad, but what happens when you don't manage nuclear power very well, and when you do Soviet Union style cut the corners. Because I said the reason they had this type of reactor is because it was cheaper to build. Heavy water is very expensive because you have to have very specific centrifuges, and it's it's a very involved process that takes a lot of expensive stuff. And the Soviet Union didn't like that fact because the Soviet Union was, say, by the late 80s, not in the best financial situation, to put it mildly.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so this other team kicks over at midnight and then decides to run the test later. I believe they'll do about 1 or 2 in the morning because I think the explosion is about 2:15, if I remember correctly. Could be slightly off with that. So they start, and so they're like, all right, we're going to bring this core down. We're going to just power it down. Put all of the control rods in, which absorb those neutrons, and we'll bring it to. However, the power started dropping as they expected, but it kept dropping well below what they thought. And they were worried they were going to completely shut the reactor down. And as I said, they needed to keep a little bit going so they can actually start the thing again. So it went well below what they wanted for the test. So instead of running the test, they just, okay, let's try getting it running again. But the reason it dropped off is because all the xenon was hanging around. So as soon as they slowed the reaction, it kept absorbing neutrons, and well, thing went slower than they expected. Again, because the team wasn't aware of all that buildup from the day's high demand. So their response, and understandably, was let's pull the control rods out, speed the reactor up. However, the speed was like the reaction rate was declining so fast, they pulled pretty much all of the control rods pretty much out of the experiment, out of the reactor, sorry, to do this experiment or to fix their attempt at it anyway. And so the reactor starts building up pace again, but as it does, it burns all that xenon off. So the thing that was slowing it down is now being burnt off. And by burnt, I don't mean like fire burning. I'm talking nuclear burning, which is the reaction.
Like evaporating.
Yeah, well, it gets bombarded by neutrons and then so on and so forth. But essentially, all the sources I read talk about burning it off, because you can talk about burning in nuclear reactions. So you can say the sun is burning. It's just you have to be specific that it's fusion. It's not combustion. Anyway, so the reactor starts speeding up again, but because they've got all the control rods, there's nothing to stop it. So it just keeps getting hotter and then faster and hotter and faster, because again, they've just got regular water, so it starts voiding and getting bubbles, so there's less of it in the path of the neutrons. So now you have a faster reaction. So they see this and they just see this exponential growth of the nuclear power and they panic. And by the time they see this, you can understand their reaction. They're just like, okay, no, we're not going to try and rescue this. And they hit the emergency shutdown. And here was another thing, and I cannot actually understand the reason why they built it this way. But when they built the reactor, they capped the control rods, which are, remember, these are the things meant to slow the reaction down, with graphite, which is the moderator that speeds the reaction up. And so the very tip of those control rods as they drop back down is speeding the reaction up until the rest of the rods come in. And they reckon when the control rods reach the bottom, you basically made this perfect line of just full everything enhanced the reactor, and it went way out of control. And the people in the control room could only watch as, even though they've hit the emergency shutdown, the energy of the reactor goes so high that it breaks the meter at its maximum. It leaves the meter reading the maximum output and probably got a couple of orders of magnitude higher. One of the people who was in the actual chamber where the cores were kept saw the nuclear rods with material jumping. They weigh a couple of 100 kilos each. The actual reactor had a cap of about 1,000 tons. It's about a ton, the cap for the reactor, and it got blown off in the first of two explosions. They're not entirely sure exactly what caused them. The most common explanation is the first one was just pressure. Like the pressure just built up and blew the top off. Then the oxygen and the steam reacted with some of the metals present, catalyzed hydrogen, and then you got a second conventional actual explosion. But I've read a couple of sources that suggest that one of those explosions may have been a very small nuclear detonation, which their evidence is compelling, and I reckon it's not that unreasonable that could have happened as well. But yes, it basically blew the cap off. The elephant's foot, which is the original thing that people were mentioning, it was basically once they eventually acknowledged, because the government wanted to call it an industrial disaster, not a nuclear one, because, well, no, we can't go this wrong. This is not good. It doesn't make us look good. When they eventually realized how bad it was, their approach was, we need to seal this thing up. So they just dumped a bunch of concrete on it. They were just like, let's just encase the thing in concrete. As I said, they kept the other cores kept running because Ukraine needed power. Even after the Soviet Union fell, they didn't have enough other power generators in the area. So they kept as much as Chernobyl running, and the elephant's foot was basically this about 1,000 tons of concrete that they poured over the reactor to basically seal it in. Also, if you look at the modern reactor, they basically built a dome over the whole thing to try and keep the radiation in. So it's a very interesting case. So when I said the Russians should not be slamming missiles into this thing, they really shouldn't, because if you break any of these, we probably will have more radiation leaking.
Yeah.
I believe that there was actually a like when you have bushfires, it's something like 5 or 10 times the amount of expected radiation being released, because all of the plants absorb the radiation and it gets sprayed out. So there's that. But yes, it was should never have happened. It was basically, this is how you don't run a reactor.
And the elephant's foot itself is in reference to the materials that melted and spread like they were magma, yes?
I think so. Maybe you're right, because I'm thinking, I thought it might have actually been the concrete they poured over, though. I think at this point it was probably both by the time they finished. Because I'm not sure. Yeah, some of it would have melted, but I don't think the whole reactor actually melted. I'm just going to double check, because if I am a little mistaken, I'd like to know.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. Terrifying, but fascinating.
I think you're right. I think the elephant's foot is the actual mass of the reactor itself. I was thinking more of the basically the attempt to seal the elephant's foot in. So no, you're from. Yep.
Macarp said it's Corum. I don't know
Corium.
what Corum is.
Basically, yeah. Okay, so it's a mix of the leftovers of the stuff. Yeah, it's a mix of things, so it's not one thing. Although I do get to talk about a myth I am aware. So yes, no, I am wrong. So they did basically try and pour a bunch of concrete over it to seal it in. They basically built a giant hat for it and then tried to seal the building. I said they kept the other cores running after that, which surprised me when I first learned it. You would have thought, okay, let's not go anywhere near
everybody
this,
run away. Yeah,
but no, they couldn't. Well, I mean, could, but saying they could or couldn't, it's difficult when you're also bringing economics and politics into it, and I don't wish
especially
too
Soviet politics. Those involve guns.
Yes. Well, also remember, it was former Soviet Union, so it was after the Soviet Union they kept these things running. There's still, I believe, some of these types of reactors, though they did make modifications to them all after Chernobyl to try and avoid that. But yeah, Chernobyl should never have happened. However, as a result, it scared everyone into thinking this is how nuclear power will go. And yes, this looks like the chat also, I think, may have beaten us to it. There's a slight delay, so there's that. But you don't want anyone going near this elephant's foot today. It's not going to do you any good. I imagine long-term radiation poisoning is not what you'll be worrying about. It'll be acute.
As an alternative, what do you think about the prospect of fusion to replace fission?
So replace is. I'm going to assume by replace you're talking about generating power for scale of cities and countries.
Yeah,
because I think that there will still be cases where, say, SMAs will, like, it's not going to entirely take it over. Like SMA, so small modular, or SMR, small modular reactors, basically small units. Things like that will probably take a use even if fusion becomes really common. The big problem with fusion is that the actual conditions that it runs under are insanely, well, they're insane, although I don't wish to use the tautology. They're quite physically intense. You end up with temperatures that are close to the surface of the sun. You have a lot of radiation coming out of these things as well. So one of the biggest issues, although we've actually gotten to the point where we can get nuclear reactors to give us more energy back than we put in, trapping that energy is difficult. And the other difficulty is that you can't run these reactors for very long. Some of them only run in the order of seconds, I think. So we have to overcome those big issues. I think it will be possible. There's that much, like from a physics point of view, it's doable. It's just from a practical point of view and actually figuring out the best way to do it is where most of the time's going. As I said, I don't think it'll completely take over nuclear. And I think the other issue too is that you're also doing this in competition with other sources like solar and wind. And I mean, hydro is probably in many places like Europe and America probably relatively close to capacity. And water is also going to become an increasingly, well, fresh water is going to become an increasingly limited resource. It already is, particularly in many places of the world. It's going to probably become worse. I can see that I can definitely see a fair likelihood that we'll get fusion running to a point where it will be a big source of power, but it's definitely not going to be the only one. It'll still be in conjunction with a lot of other things. And
okay, something that gets brought up a lot is that the new generation of reactors can actually use the waste from the old generation for fuel.
yes, I have heard this. I'm aware of it. I haven't looked too much into the detailed nuclear reactions to say too much on it.
Well, I just hear it brought up a lot, and I haven't seen anything to
thorium
verify
reactors.
how true this is.
I wanted to ask one of my lecturers who actually used to teach nuclear physics about it, but many years ago, people in my country decided that nuclear power is scary, so protested, and the university basically canned all of its nuclear courses and made people sign NDAs so they can't actually teach nuclear physics. Which is, this was many years ago. I don't know what what would happen currently if you tried again. I think you'd have a better shot this time.
Okay, Bree from Hive Science asked if you've heard of the Blackbird of Chernobyl. I don't know what that refers to.
It's another cryptid. Bree, as you know, Bree's specialty.
Oh, well, yes, I can see someone there.
If there was a cryptid, I could see them being around Chernobyl because I have seen pictures of some of the mutated animals that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Or some of the ones who did, which is also kind of trippy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Tapioca Weasel is in the chat. Praise the Weasel.
Yeah,
he just came in.
Yeah.
Hello. I have been hearing about Dr. T. Yes, sorry, I think... I'm not sure if this is just having a go at the generators that they use anyway in nuclear physics, or if this is a giant human version of a hamster wheel. Unfortunately,
I think
if you try making giant human hamster wheels, people have problems with the ethics of that for some reason. I can't think of why.
Yes, well, people might, but porpoises won't.
That's true.
Well, they might have a problem, but they're not going to be able to tell us.
Well, I think that's part of their plan to take over the land.
Look, they'll probably want me around because they'll need someone to run their lasers. They'll need a few people. So, I have to say, but yes. If people have any more science questions, happy to go for it. Particularly from the panel. Also, if there's anyone who's part of the Christmas marathon as well, I have put the StreamYards link in there. Also, if you're not part of that, but you're someone I've been on before and know I know who what your channel is, and particularly if you've been on my channel before, I'll happily let you on. Just because there's more people than usual, I'm not going to open it up fully to just anyone because yes, we don't need flat earthers or crazy young Earth creation. Well, crazy young Earth creationists, because I'm sure there's some sensible ones who just haven't been taught.
I mean, in theory, there could be some sensible. Actually, Dr. Tapioca Weasel's friends with one.
Well, see, when you're talking pseudoscience, one of the issues, this is why I won't attack people for having different views. One, if everyone's telling you you're correct all the time, you're going to be wrong all the time. Basically, you can't learn unless you know that you have stuff to learn.
Yeah.
So, me going and attacking people isn't going to help.
I will
attack individuals
badly educated.
yeah, if they're bad actors, I will. But my issue is with the pseudoscience.
Right.
You, like, as I've said on here, I don't care if you're. Don't care is probably the wrong way, because it makes it like, oh, I don't care. No, not in that sense. But like, I don't have an issue with people having all sorts of views. I will, if you want to come and ask me science question, I don't care if you're a crazy flat earther. If you come and ask science questions genuinely, the only time I'll have an issue with what people believe is if it's pseudoscientific and damaging. Generally, if it's pseudoscientific, it'll be damaging in one way or another. But again, I can understand that people can have the best of intentions and still understand wacky stuff. So,
Yeah.
My issue is with the pseudoscience. I will only take issues with very select individuals who have been demonstrated to be bad actors. I think if we're talking young Earth creationists, most people will know of another person who unfortunately has the same first name as me. For those who are not familiar, hi, my name's Matt.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say something else. I was like, oh no, because it would be the third time and he'd appear.
Yeah, don't worry, I don't have that name.
No, we know some good Matts too.
I thought you were saying you knew somebody else whose first name was almost.
I've met a lot of people who are sort of almost there in some regards, but
yeah,
that might
now,
be.
How would you like people to refer to you?
A couple of people in the community who are,
I have no
the doctor, but.
Yes, so I know almost a doctor is not the easiest. I'm happy for people to use.
Oh no, I think it's a great handle.
I don't mind which one. To me, they're both the same.
Yeah, it's a great channel name, but hard to, like, hey, almost a doctor. How you doing today?
Yeah, no, you can use Matt. Here, let me make it a little easier.
Well, we can't actually call you Doc, so maybe we'll just call you Alm Doc.
I guess. I mean, I'm not complaining, because it said, as long as people know who, as long as I know you're referring to me, you could basically, I don't mind too much.
Yeah, as far as it goes for the chat, I recognize almost everybody in there, so I don't think that we have any trolls in here.
No, and based on the comments, I don't think so too. And also the fact that I think that's the other advantage of me being like, you can come and ask anything, but if you start going off topic, I'll just ignore it, or if I have to mute, means that it's sort of like most trolls just don't stay around. They're not going to get much out of it. Again, also my channel's also a bit smaller, so as I said, they're not going to get as much. There's bigger targets to go after. Who knows? One day maybe I'll do that. I will consider myself to be a successful YouTuber the day that I get get whacked by Doctor.
That guy.
Kent Hoven. I should probably, I have to turn down my Australian accent when I say his first name. Yeah.
Sinister Porpoise is offering to troll you if you want it.
I mean, I would prefer science questions.
She's
it depends
very
how
good
you
at
troll
it.
me. You're allowed. Okay. I will make one caveat. You're allowed to troll, but it has to be funny. If it's not funny.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's very good at that.
But at which point it's just banter. So they will talk smack even if they're the only ones, if they're the only one in the chat. Yeah, I'm sure they will. And I said I have had trolls before. I'm not saying I haven't. You've had bots. I think I've had more bots than trolls, but that's any channel at the moment.
I've had surprisingly few over the years.
Yeah, I think part of it is because, my channel's not big enough. My name in the community is not like that side of, say, the debunking community is not well known enough that it would be worthwhile, which is why I would why I'm saying I'll consider my YouTube career made if I get a dedicated whacking by Kent Hoven, because it means that I've somehow said enough good science to piss them off and they think it's worthwhile.
The only one of my original channel goals that I have not yet achieved is I have to get Ken Ham to call me out.
Oh, I think that one's a little harder.
Paula Gia said that anybody that Ken Ham calls out by name gets a guest spot on his channel. So that's
I've heard him say that.
I want to see a cartoon version of me, so I'm happy to try and meet that. I said it'll be probably more likely to occur when I when I finish the PhD, because at the moment, as people can see, I haven't actually done a scripted video for about a year now, a bit more. But that is just because PhD is too crazy when it settles down. I will probably try and do a few live streams over the course of the year. But as I said, when you're working 40 plus hours a week and it's mentally draining stuff, it's sometimes hard. However, at the moment I'm on break and I still like going on other people's channels. So if people want to have me on to discuss certain physics topics, like as I said, I did one with Granny talking about, Godless Granny talking about basically a version of Dr. Lyle's. We assume that it's just convention that the speed of light is the same in all directions. So if we assume that coming towards the Earth is infinite and it's half c going outside, then there's no problem with this, with all of the light speed coming towards us. And I basically went on, and so the paper was an extension of that, saying we've defined the initial conditions. And then I read the paper and be like, you've stated you've defined the initial conditions, but the only maths I saw in that paper was to do with the age of supernovae remnants, because they obviously couldn't do any maths that actually had anything to do with relativity. And I basically got to sit there going, the reason why, like I wanted more to debunk, but I was basically had to sit there and be like, there's nothing here to debunk.
Yeah.
I haven't stated anything. I can debunk the actual premise where they're coming from. So like I said, I'll happily do that because it's like I can talk about the physics.
I'm hearing that complaint more and more, that it's like all of the major talking points have been debunked so many times that they're putting up things that are so fragile, it's just poking a hole through it.
Yeah, as I said, there wasn't really much to it, but they made it look a lot more scientific. They used a lot of technical jargon and things like that, which I can understand that people who are not as familiar with physics, which, by the way, I don't think everyone needs to be. That's not like, thing is, I'm a physicist, but we all have our own expertise, whether it's formal expertise that you actually have degrees or titles, or whether it's just the fact that you've been working in an industry for 50 years or somewhere in between. We all have our own areas, and you can't expect everyone to know everything about every area. So I am well aware that a bunch of creationists who want to write a paper that sort of talks about relativity is going to be difficult for a lot of people to understand. And then I read it and was like, there's nothing here. But sometimes it's what you need. You need someone to point out, don't worry if you don't understand this. It isn't written to be understood. But I also have that problem with a lot of proper scientific papers as well. They're written to sound technical and get published, not necessarily to convey
My
the
only
science.
qualification for discussing the subject is that I am myself a physical object.
Yes. However, the thing is that you're like, because I know enough of your content, Purple, I can say this, and Emma, from what I've heard, I'm assuming you're probably the same. You actually know where your limits are, and hopefully I know where mine are. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in something I haven't got a clue about.
If I was really clear on what my limits were, I would not have so many things that I ponder at night and wonder why I'm still alive. Workplace accidents.
Ah, okay. My worst one was spilling a chemical weapon on my hand.
And my goodness.
Getting bits of a face and on my other hand. Yeah, that was third-degree chemical burns and a skin graft later.
Oof.
My worst one was getting 3 of my fingers truncated in a power saw.
Ooh. No, I think that wins here. Not that you want to win this competition, but
it was almost 10 years ago, so I tend not to think about it too much. It's just every once in a while when I try to pick something up, I realize. And actually, it's like I've gotten to the point that I don't even really think about it typing, but I'm typing with only one finger on the right hand. So it's got a lot more territory to cover.
Yeah, I was very lucky, but I got basically full use back of everything that got burnt, but it took a while. So yeah, that's
did you get superpowers?
I'm still waiting. Lab accidents are meant to give you superpowers, so I'm waiting for mine. I think my superpower is procrastinating writing my thesis, but that's every PhD. No, I've been writing papers. So yeah, hoping
Well,
to do that.
Yeah, I've had a huge problem procrastinating typing up my novel into a form that other people could see it. It's all in my head, but other people can't read it that way.
It is difficult, yes.
Yes. Also, sorry, I just want to make a note before I forget. In the chat, I know someone was also pointing out earlier that if we kept talking about, like, say, nuclear stuff that happily come on, and other people said, I'll actually make it a bit wider. As long as we know who you are in the community, so if Purple or Ember or someone else here who I'm familiar with knows who you are, I'm happy to send you the StreamYards link. So it's just basically, if this is your first time here and you're not familiar, it's just more to control that we don't get trolls on.
Well, I've only seen 2 people in the chat that I have not been in streams with, which is
and I also acknowledge
Jason
there's
and
some
Drew
people
is.
who might have found my
Yeah.
channel
they're
through
both
other
good.
means who have seen me live streaming for the first time in a while and want to join. So that's okay. If you do, you feel free. Like I said, if you're part of the Christmas Marathon, you should already be able to see the link. If not, just send me a message on Twitter. Is probably the easiest one. Should be able to DM me. My hashtag is @DrAlmost because almost a doctor was taken. So it's just one word, Dr. Almost. I'm hoping that I won't need to change that one when I finish, because not technically incorrect once I get the PhD. Although I do need to point out that submitting the thesis and getting the actual title, there's about a 6-month gap. So that's how I can still make videos and update and tell people where the channel is going once I finish, because I should hopefully have the time for that, depending on how getting full-time work goes after that. Here we go. We do have Dr. T. Welcome, Dr. T.
Praise the weasel.
Hello. Can you get okay? So this is the first time I've ever joined from my phone because I'm at home and I don't have my computer. So probably people will yell at me for some reason or the other related to audio.
Actually, your audio's pretty good right now.
Yeah, no, it's not bad for just running off a phone.
Fantastic.
I've definitely heard worse. I think it was actually no, I'm not going to repeat the worst I've heard, because the analogy is not exactly appropriate for a Christmas stream. But yes, I've definitely heard a lot worse audio. So since all right, do you want to introduce yourself first, and then we can get back to questions, and I shall try and catch up with the chat again.
Yeah, sure.
It's tea time.
Yeah, no, I'm Dr. Tapioca Weasel. I'm a physicist. I got my PhD last year. I almost am going to have to say 2 years ago, very shortly. And yeah, I'm a postdoc currently, and I use lasers, and I study cold atoms and shit, and it's really, something quantum something. Yeah. Gravitational waves.
Like quantum computing, or?
So the big collaboration that I'm a part of, that my boss is the principal investigator for, is this thing called MAGIS 100, where MAGIS MAGIS 100, and it stands for matter wave atom interferometric gravitational matter wave atomic gravitational interferometric sensor or something. It's actually had a few different parsings of exactly the same acronyms.
Americans,
but, Yeah,
it's
we're
just
not,
to
we're
show
not,
how far some people will go to make an acronym.
So
yeah,
you're using
we're not very
optical
smart.
tweezers?
We're using, we're going to be using, actually, I've been spending a lot of time in the last few months thinking about the very precise sort of design and safety features for the optical dipole trap that we're going to use, which are sometimes called optical tweezers. There's sort of a strange sort of situation where if you're using them to trap individual atoms, then you would call them optical tweezers, and if you're using them to trap large dielectric spheres, you also call them optical tweezers. But in the middle ground, you don't use the word tweezer because reasons. And
yes, you have to be a lot of little technical details that are just convention, whether they actually work
yeah,
or not.
totally. The whole thing, everything is just convention all the way through. In physics, the same word can have not quite, but almost, and in a very large sense, diametrically opposite meanings, it seems. And the example that I have for this is the word adiabatic.
Ooh.
Because in the context of thermodynamics, adiabatic means sort of rapidly, such that the entropy doesn't change. An adiabatic process is, I believe, and by the way, I might get this wrong because I don't know this definition as well as I know the other one. An adiabatic process, and I don't do a whole lot of classical thermodynamics. An adiabatic process, though, is like a reversible one. It's one where the entropy of the system doesn't change. So the sudden compression of a piston in like an internal combustion engine, you don't actually change the entropy. If you just compress suddenly and compress all that air and heat it up, and then you release it, other than the amount of friction that you've dissipated in the walls of the piston, other than that, it's a reversible process. In quantum mechanics, however, an adiabatic process is one where the change is slow enough that the quantum state occupation of the system doesn't change because it's suddenly just like yanked around, and it's easier to hop to another energy level. So in one case, you have rapid sort of sudden changes, and the other case you have slow gradual changes where it adjusts to its surrounding. That would be a lot more akin to slowly compressing a piston so that the gas never heats up at all. They're just completely different definitions. It's super weird.
Yeah, and then you have that where it's like different areas will use the same word slightly differently. Also, come back to that. But we have another person. I'm starting to build up a panel here. We have Brainless Steel. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, Brainless
I am
Steel is a
doing
regular
quite
on
well. I'm
Sim
enjoying a
Cyborgs.
break, and as you can tell in where I am, because I'm in Australia, it is warm enough here that I can be in shorts for Christmas. Although it is now technically Boxing Day here, but I know that the world hasn't fully rotated far enough yet that there aren't people who it's still.
It is warm enough here in Minnesota that I can be in shorts today. Although in Minnesota in December, that just means it's above freezing.
I mean, I'm wearing my dress, but I always do.
Yeah, actually, we've been getting near record high temperatures here. We've been in the mid-50s Fahrenheit this week.
Because that's one conversion that I don't do easily in my head is Fahrenheit to Celsius, because I can do most of the other imperial unit, the American units, because
who can multiply by 9/5 in their head?
Freedom units.
Yeah, I should probably do a video on the Mars Climate Orbiter where the getting a bit of code wrong converting the units over crashed a several $100 million worth of orbiter and rover.
This is why we can't have nice things.
So much easier.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I am so upset because, when I was in school in the late 70s, we were learning the metric system because we were all told that everything in the world would be metric by the year 2000.
It should have been.
It almost is, except America.
Basically, it's like us and Myanmar and one other tiny country.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that Ronald Reagan canceled it to save the government money. Among other things, he didn't want to approve. He didn't want to approve of them reprinting all the highway signs.
I mean, look, you can't just.
We have to do that every few years anyway.
And I mean, you can't just change this stuff overnight. Otherwise, there would be mass confusion.
Yeah, you'd have to. Yeah, and also, like,
I'm sorry, everyone, but I love
with the speeds in the cars. Like, you need. You also have something on your dashboard. Like with the newer cars, it's probably just go to the garage and like they hook it up and change something in the software, and it switches from miles to kilometers. But
all American cars have both anyway.
Have them both. Yeah, they have them both.
Okay.
Although in the 80s, it wasn't a matter of reprogramming computers because most of the cars still had analog speedometers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. Now, I know everyone in chat is dying to know, Between you, Matt,
I
and
swear to God.
and you, Vandy,
I swear to God,
Which
if
of
you ask how
you-
magnets work, I'm going to lose my mind.
you're psychic. I was gonna say which one of you. You even brought it up in the chat, so I don't want to hear it.
I did
Which one of
not.
you can explain how magnets work?
Okay,
Magic.
so for the record, almost, this is a meme that they use to mock me, because
Oh, I
can't
can understand
explain.
this meme because there is this thing in physics where explaining exactly how magnets work is, well, not something that can be done very easily. So,
Well, yeah, because, well, frankly, explaining how anything works, if you just keep on asking why, if you keep on asking, okay, yes, but that explanation, that whole thing that you just explained, where you have this model and it's great and it predicts all the stuff, why is that model true? You can always do that, and guess what? You run into a philosophical wall, just like you always do, everywhere, constantly, forever. So stop asking me how magnets work.
Okay, every
my
parent
answer
knows
is
this.
they work. We know how to use them. Next.
Every parent knows this because every parent has had a 3 or 4-year-old that every answer you give them, they ask you why.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
I stopped
we're
asking my
dealing
parents.
Why?
Well, I was just gonna say we're dealing with like family, friends, and cousins, like young cousins. When they ask that, they're not generally expecting a very detailed answer. They just want to keep asking why. So I found that at least for me, it works very well if I give them a very detailed answer, because then they realize that if two can play at this game, they tend. But what I've found is that as they get older, they actually ask because they want to know the answer. They know they're going to get an answer. It's not just going to be dismissive. Does it work all the time? No, because some of them. But yeah, generally, if you're talking like sort of
100%.
toddlers or like young kids, you can outpatient them.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And sometimes you can tell, because I've definitely seen those cases where like the kid is asking why because it is a brain dead easy way to respond when the adult has stopped talking and paused for a certain amount of time. That will keep the adult occupied for a certain amount of time. And if I had a kid that just kept on saying why, I would be like, can you say back to me in slightly different wording, maybe, the explanation I just gave to you to see if you actually understand, so you even understand why you're asking why?
What I did with my kids, as I'd say, why,
and then they look
what?
at you blankly.
The other one,
that's much more succinct and effective, Ember.
the other approach that I've heard, is to actually say, okay, I will tell you, but first, what do you think? What's your guess?
Yeah,
and that actually gets them thinking as well.
Yeah,
and I think
that's good teaching right there.
I did have that problem with 2 of my kids because, well, I brought them up in the museums and libraries. But when they spent the weekend at their fathers believed that the Flintstones was a documentary and that humans had domesticated dinosaurs.
Oof.
Well,
he wasn't a flat earther, but yeah.
Not far off.
I mean, a factor of 1,000, 10,000, something like that.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
so I was bringing him to the museum, and we were, reading all the things about dinosaurs we could find in the library.
I have had the questions before when talking to kids from parents about what I believe when talking dinosaurs with them. But I find that if I take the same approach they do for the YouTube channel, though, a similar one, saying they're not mutually exclusive, just chatting science, then most of the time that's pretty disarming.
How many other talking dinosaurs have you known?
4. Most of them birds.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
Well played.
I had a very foul-mouthed parrot. She was a trip.
Oh, I'm just thinking of which was the US president who had the swearing parrot? It wasn't Johnson, was it? The one that he started cursing at his funeral.
I've got a joke about that. This lady goes to, this her old lady, her husband dies, and she's really lonely, because there's just no one to talk to. There's no voice in the house. So she decides to go to the pet shop and ask them, do you have a talking bird? And the guy shows her a couple of parrots, but they're like, $1,000, and I don't have that kind of money. And the guy kind of reluctantly says, well, I do have one in the back that I can sell you for $50.
Oh
but
no.
most people don't really like him. And she said, well, bring him out. And as soon as he takes the cover off the cage, the bird is swearing up and down. And the guy puts the cover back on to shut him up, and the lady says, well, at least there'll be somebody talking in the house. So she takes him home, but she doesn't realize that this bird never stops, just 24/7, cussing like a sailor. And she goes and she, checks on the internet, all the ideas for quieting the bird down or anything. Just nothing works. And, after 3 days without any sleep because of this, she's just so frazzled she can't think straight. And she grabs the bird, she throws him in the freezer, and suddenly everything's silent. And she's like, that couldn't have done anything to him that fast. What's going on? And she opens up the freezer, and the bird's standing there and says, ma'am, may I come out now? She's like, okay. And, she extends her arm, and the bird hops up on her hand, and the bird says, I'll behave. And she says, that's wonderful. What? She says, I'll be good. So, and she's just wondering what happened. And finally the bird says, ma'am, may I ask a question? He says, sure. And he says, ma'am, what did the chicken do to upset you?
Ready, go with the sound effects. Got to take.
I know that one. It's terrible.
It's
No,
terrible. It's so
I love
terrible
me
that it's
some lame
funny.
jokes.
I love
Think
terrible
of the
jokes.
science ones. There definitely isn't a video on my channel about me just going for like 4 minutes straight of all the lame science jokes I can remember off the top of my head. No, that definitely doesn't exist.
Hold on while I Google.
Oh, and while I was telling that Sinister Porpoise said that Andrew Jackson was the president who had the swearing parrot.
That's right, Jackson.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Yes, I saw that as well. But you beat me to bring it back up. All right. As much as I like history, I am also going to encourage science questions, though. I'll try and answer history ones.
Cool. I want to go back a couple steps to
Sure.
your talk on Godless Granny's channel. I've actually talked with Vandy about this. What are your thoughts on the possibility?
I'm Vandy, by the way.
Yes,
I'm
Dr.
Vandy,
Tapioca
yeah.
Weasels. When there's multiple science people,
Yeah.
I call them Vandy because it helps keep things straight. But what are your thoughts on the possibility of measuring a one-way speed of light?
This point, very difficult. That's also not quite
Good
in my
answer.
area because. So yeah, go.
I was saying good answer. Ember has heard my answer. We did a stream about this. But keep going. Sorry, I'm very
I was just
interested
going to say that
in your answer.
The difficulty with it is that measuring one way is going to be fundamentally flawed unless we can think of something very, very creative, because information travels at the speed of light too. So it doesn't matter which direction you're going to have that anisotropy. So just for anyone we talked about one-way speed of light, the way that we measure the speed of light is you have to measure it to a target and back again. So it's the two-way because it's the return journey. And so convention states that we will assume that the speed of light is the same in both directions in a vacuum, because obviously if you put a medium in there and have density change, yes, you can slow down the speed of light.
Information, by the way, even in those cases, information can still propagate. Like information is not limited. There's not an index of refraction for information.
Yes,
for
that's
example.
also, yeah. So I should have pointed that one out too.
Well,
I was just
I only came to that realization. I only came to that realization sort of recently. It's not sort of a thing that I've ever heard pointed out before. I don't think.
Yeah, sorry. I was just
Because
mentioning being
it's
able to
not
slow the light down because
Yeah,
when
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about C, it's always C in a vacuum, and I just wanted to make sure that
No, for sure.
that was covered because you can slow speed of light down, though you can't, as far as we can tell, speed it up from the speed in a vacuum. You can do weird things to space time, but it's still actually not really changing C. You're just changing what light moves through.
Yeah,
However,
exactly.
so the issue here is that it's just convention that we assume that the speed of light is the same in all directions. However, we don't have a way to measure it in one direction, and you might be thinking, okay, we'll just put a timer at each end and time how long it goes from one point to the other. However, how do you get the timer from one point to the other and then make sure that they're synced? Because if there is an anisotropy, which basically means it's not symmetric, to simplify a fair bit, then if you move the timer through that, you're also going to suffer from the same issues that will affect the speed of light. Because so you have a fundamental problem where you can't really measure it, because if you have to basically race light against itself, and that doesn't work well when you're trying to measure the one-way speed of light.
Yay.
And
I is smart. That's basically the answer I gave in the side chat.
Yeah, and it's actually, yes, what I was talking on Granny's channel about is that Dr. Jason Lyle, he's a real doctor, though not in relativity, though he was trying to talk about relativity. And although it's not my area, I know enough about it to know that it was no way. This was a couple of other people who were trying to extend on his idea. What they were stating is that, well, what if the speed of light was infinite coming towards Earth and half c going away? Then the two-way speed of light, the round trip, still takes the same amount of time, because it takes it goes half as fast, so twice as long in one direction, but instant the other way.
Yeah, that's Lyle's answer to the distant starlight problem.
Yes, it's basically,
he can't have the universe be more than 6,000 years old. So how do we see stuff billions of light years away? Well, it's not actually billions of years ago. It's happening right now because the light coming this way is instantaneous. Yeah, for some reason.
Yeah, I know Veritasium has also done a much longer video on this.
Great video.
Yes,
absolutely phenomenal video.
Yeah, and I've yeah, I know one of his writers. One day I'm hoping to actually try and contribute to the channel, but at the moment I'm a bit busy. I met Derek.
My ego is huge. I would love to get in on that.
Oh yeah, I too. I met Derek when the fire alarm in my physics building went off because they were filming. So because I know one of the writers.
Where
are
you at?
I saw this person I hadn't met. Like I hadn't seen him in a while. So I'm just like, oh, hi, how you going? And he's like, oh, by the way, this is Derek. He just points behind him. I was just like, oh, okay, hi. And then he goes away, and I'm just talking to Derek about my PhD for a few minutes. But yes, it's just...
Derek seems like a very chill dude.
Yeah, he did. Again, I only met him very briefly. The fire off, but that was it was good. Yeah, there's quite a few the science communicators I'd love to meet, to see, amongst other reasons, to see whether they're the same in real life as they are on camera. Because, like I said earlier, I know Dr. Carl. His office is very close to mine, and so I see him fairly regularly.
The only Carl I know off the top of my head is Carl Sagan, but I'm pretty sure he's not with us any longer.
No, so this is basically Australia's Bill Nye. So he has self-described as micro-famous. He's reasonably well known within Australia. Outside of that, not as well. But he genuinely wants to help people with science communication. He just likes to get as many people involved. It's not about him. It's about the science. And I appreciate that a lot. And yeah, I was helping him try and calculate in terms of the energy, the extra energy the Earth's absorbing from climate change, how many, like we had some rough numbers for how many Hiroshima bombs per day worth of energy we're absorbing. So we basically, I scaled that up and said, okay, so how long would it take before the Earth's absorbed the amount of energy that was given to us by the impact of the asteroid that took out the dinosaurs, the KT
Chicxulub
impact? Yeah, the Chicxulub impact. And so I was doing that, and unfortunately, there's a huge range of possible numbers that are given, so you end up with a pretty big range. But we'll get there at the rate we're going, I think, which is not great. But well, that's almost a separate topic.
Why we can't have nice things?
I'm sure if you got into the politics and the economics of it, then you're not entirely wrong.
Politics.
Yes, there's a reason I avoid it on this channel. As much as personally I like talking about it, it's a topic that some people get a little touchy about, just a tiny bit. So I find that for a science channel, it is not.
Oh,
you
so
should
you
do
were
what I do.
talking about a bird with Tourette's.
I am good at tangents, and I think I'm not the only one here. So, of course, we go from a bird with Tourette's
Speaking
to
of tangents.
Yes.
Oh no! Actually, speaking of tangents, I was listening to a remarkably bad flat Earth argument the other day, and it was from, I believe it was from our good friend, that's sarcasm, Nathan Oakley.
Oh dear.
Because Nathan Oakley is of the opinion that if you have a curved surface, it is completely nonsensical and meaningless to speak of an angle of a straight line with respect to that curved surface, because I suppose he doesn't know what tangency is.
Screams in calculus.
It freaking geometry.
Yeah,
What?
my education level ain't that high, but like from watching flat Earth debunking videos, I've learned a lot.
That's actually why I don't mind watching debunking videos like that, because they're
fantastic.
Show you
how
them. Much science we take for granted. That's just like basic
Yes.
stuff you don't think about.
I basically I love learning new things.
Okay, so again, we're not
science.
talking about a polite man at the beach.
Correct.
I don't think so.
Somebody's trying to derail this.
If we're talking about Nathan Oakley, we're not talking about a polite anything in any context.
I think I know. So he's not the one who had the giant Facebook group taken down. That's the other Nathan. This is the one who has his mute button and likes to curse people out.
Yeah.
No, I've been invited. I got invited onto that.
Yeah,
Flat Earther,
you're smart that you did
declined. As I said, the person who invited me seemed polite enough, but I know what that channel is like, and people like that are not welcome on my channel because as I said, I will happily have a discussion about science, but I will not. I won't get into that debate mode and this whole thing. Not that I think he'd ever come on my channel, but I think that's probably for the better of everyone. Let's keep that down. But
yeah, we've got
I had
to hand over to Pocket Locker.
Yes, we will
4 minutes.
Just a few minutes too.
Yeah.
Sorry, I will let you explain that. Darth Dawkins, I am myself reasonably chilled, and so if people try and insult me, I don't care too much. But if you go around insulting other people, particularly if you're quite bigoted, then you are not welcome on this channel either. As I said, you can show up in the chat and ask questions, but no one will come on here if they have a history of being nasty to other people. And Double D there does. So, as I said, I won't, because I will not give a platform to people who have said some of the stuff he has. Again, it's a limited case of people where I would do that, but if you've been shown to be a bad actor, no.
I don't think you'll find many complainers here.
No, I don't think I will. And as much as I said, I will try and keep the channel just for science, I also know that with people like that, you're not talking science. You're giving a platform to.
We have like 3 minutes now.
Yes, we do.
I wanted
So,
to ask you. I may have already asked this. You may have already answered it. It's Christmas Day. I've been drinking. What is where are you based at? If you're comfortable revealing that, and like, what is your background? You're a physics guy. Are you currently in graduate school? Like,
I am doing my PhD now. This is my 4th year. I got delayed by the pandemic, as I was stating earlier, but it was before you showed up. I started 2 weeks before COVID reached Australia. Specifically, I'm based out of Sydney. I have mentioned the uni before, and it's actually not too hard to track it down. But like, you could track roughly down where I am based on things I've said, but that would take effort. I'm not going to specify that too many times. I mean, I'm not
What kind of physics do you study?
I'm in spectroscopy, sort of integrated optics.
You and I have a lot to talk about. I'm an experimental AMO atomic guy, not as much an optics guy, but yeah. Beautiful.
Well, yeah, I am happy to come and have a chat with you about physics then, because, well, we can probably get quite in depth.
I don't have content on my channel, so I'll come to you.
So my honors was in a very niche field called polariton lasing, so looking at materials for doing Bose-Einstein condensation. Or like
I know. See why I was so excited to get you on here?
My thesis advisor was Eric Cornell. I was his last Bose-Einstein condensation student. He was one of the guys who got the prize in 2001 for it. So, yeah.
It's priceless seeing Tapioca Weasel getting more excited the more specific you get.
Bose-Einstein condensation is my whole jam. It was one of the first questions I asked, actually. I asked about what was the fundamental insight of Satyendra Nath Bose, and the answer was, of course, the fact that he elucidated a distinct way of counting the states that a system can be in. And then Einstein's elucidation and translation upon that, and how he emphasized in Bose's insight that this has physical consequences. The way you count things has physical consequences. It's nuts. It's so cool.
Yes, but I'm going to have to say we are at time now. Although I love the energy, we have to keep this going.
Somebody has to clip that, because the next time somebody asks, "What do you mean by geeking out?" There is the definition.
That's absolutely perfect. I haven't even asked you about CARE's new formulas yet. Oh my goodness! We'll have to chat again soon.
Yes, keep that for another day. Yeah, just also don't let me get started on history, because if you want to like add to this energy on top of the science energy we already bring, just add some history to it, particularly modern. However, I'm actually going to hand the mic briefly to Purple to mention where we're all going next. I'm happy to show up, even if it's in the chat on the next one briefly. But yes, we are now, for me, it is now 2 p.m. And it is also, but anyway, it's on the hour for everyone here. So I'll hand to Purple, because we're about to hand off to the next person. Who, let me bring up. Where are we all going? And,
Pocket Locker.
Yeah, the next
Pocket
Locker.
Yes,
I'm throwing the link into the YouTube chat there.
Sure. I will see if I can, as soon as I see that, I'll see if I can make that the pinned one. So I'll keep this going for a couple of minutes, but if everyone wants to head over there, I will shut this stream down in a couple of minutes.
Yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then.
It's still on his waiting screen, so. Oh, there he goes.
I still might shut this one down anyway, because everyone can then move over.
Yeah, he just started with the 1 minute countdown. So let's all hop over there and he'll be going.
Okay.
Hell yeah. Happy holiday.
It was nice to meet you.
Yeah.
For me, it's 4 a.m. So I'm just going to have the other stream running and going to go try and get some sleep, because in the morning I'm on call.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Purple, if you put the link in yet? Sorry, I know I'm jumping around a bit.
You want in the private chat here too, or?
Either way, I can double it up onto the. I just wanted it in the YouTube chat, so I can pin it.
I put it in the YouTube chat already.
Okay. It was a little higher.
No, it should be right by the bottom.
Oh, wait.
Maybe the delay's getting me a bit, but I can't see it at the moment.
No, I don't see it either.
Yeah, I can't spot it. Here, just send it
Okay,
either
I'll-
in the private one for here, or if you can. I think I've got. Let me see if I can find
it
the
should
link.
be in both of them. And Maya just posted the link also.
Oh.
So Pocket, Pocket Locker. Yes, I think the stream just started.
Yep.
So
Yep.
what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop this over. Oh no, now they've come up. All right, let me see if I can do. No, I can't do that from here, but I can.
Yeah, I just finished his countdown.
I've just pinned that message. So for the last few moments that we're here, I'm going to say we have to bring this group back together because I've definitely got more to talk about. However, I will see you all over on Pocket Rocket.
Yep.
So that's all from me today. Sorry for the fast end.
Nope, that's fine. I know it's getting late for you over there, isn't it?
No, 2 p.m.'s not too bad.
Okay. You're middle of the afternoon.
No, I think I got one of the more sensible ones.
My brain is so broken from switching time zones around that I can't remember now when to add and when to subtract.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, really looking to meet you, Matt.
Yeah, everyone head on over to the next video in the marathon. And until next time, everyone, remember, I've been almost a doctor, and be like a proton and stay positive.
Okay. Bye.